What's up YouTube? It's me, Jess, and I'm an opera singer. Today's video is Patron Pick of the Month, and for this month they have chosen Sara Bareilles performing Once Upon Another Time with Ben Folds, Caroline Shaw, and the National Symphony Orchestra. Let's go.
Once upon another time, somebody's hands who felt like mine turned the key and took a drive, was free. Highway curve, the sun sank low. Buckley on the radio. A cigarette was burning slow. So just yellow lines and tire marks and sun-kissed skin and handlebars, and where I stood was where I was to be. No porch light on to pull me home, and where I was is beautiful because I was free. Once upon another time, before I knew which life was mine, before I left the child behind me.
Oh, okay. I've got to pause. My God. One thing about Sara Bareilles I feel is spectacular is that everything she seems to sing sounds perfect for her voice. And that's definitely not the case for so many singers. Even A-list, pop, classical, rock, that's just not the case. I feel like she is one of those rare cases where everything she's done, she's picked out meticulously and said yes to, and it suits her voice so nicely. Now, that being said, let's talk about this composition. So, Ben Folds and Caroline Shaw. So, I don't know too much about Ben Folds, but I do see in the description that he is the artistic advisor of NSO, the National Symphony Orchestra, which is a really big title, and he must have a pretty impressive classical training background in order to have this position with NSO. I've also never heard of Declassified, which apparently is a live concert series hosted by the NSO, and their home performance is the Kennedy Center in Washington. Caroline Shaw, I don't know much about. I do know that she is the composer for Partita for 8 Voices. That piece is insane. So the first thing that caught my attention was actually not the voice, but the orchestration. It says here that this piece was arranged by Rob Moose. The reason why it caught my attention first is because I was coming at it from a performance perspective. I already know what Sara Bareilles is capable of, so I know her voice and technique is spectacular. So I think naturally my ear and attention just straight went to the orchestra. Seeing a pop singer perform with a classical orchestra in this acoustic type setting is somewhat rare. You don't see that often. The other reason, which I think is quite obvious, is the lack in sound. At the very beginning, you only hear one note, and that note is prolonged. I wish I had the sheet music so I could count how long that note was prolonged and just give it to you, but it was prolonged for a very long time. When you have less sound to rely on as a vocalist, there is more opportunity for any error that you may have within your vocal technique to peak and come out, and it will be the center of attention. Any note that's flat, any note that's sharp, any word that sounds off, doesn't sound authentic, really even any facial expression. There's just so much more attention put on you as a vocalist in this type of setting. This sound is unforgiving and it's very vulnerable. When in that situation, what's really important is intonation, making sure you know every single note and the pitch that it should be, and you tune that to the one note you hear in the orchestration. 2, your posture, and 3, your pronunciation. It makes everything so high stake, which then makes you that much more nervous. I appreciate everything she's doing because 1, I've never heard this song, so I have no idea what the lyrics are. When I go into that as a viewer, I personally am really paying attention to pronunciation. The last thing I want to do as a viewer is put extra effort into trying to figure out what you said 2 lines ago so that I can fully understand the entire song. When you as a performer fulfill that need for the viewer, it makes the viewing experience that much more satisfying. Second thing is intonation, and that is really hard, especially in this scenario when you factor in nerves. It adds all of this stress to your body, which then can leak into your voice if you don't know what to do with that stress. And one thing that can happen is your intonation is out of whack. I commend her for keeping her composure and keeping the focus on the story, the text, and proper intonation.
Once upon another time, somebody's hands who felt like mine turned the key and took a drive, was free.
So right when this video starts, she sings her first note, and the strings are already playing with her. I don't know how she got that note. Maybe she got that note off stage. She heard it, she memorized it, and she was ready to sing that when she went on. But I also don't know if this one song is part of a set. Did she sing something right before this? What was the last note of that song? And did she have to base her first pitch of this song from that last song? Within the first 5 seconds of this video, there is so much going on that you may not even notice that makes this situation extremely high stake. Continuing with this idea of intonation, you've got the strings playing your tonic. And they are playing that one note the entire time. Now, Bareilles, her third note was the tonic note, the same note that the strings are playing. You, as the singer, can use that to your advantage in terms of intonation. Your first pitch is what interval from the tonic, and how well are you trained in hearing how harmonious or how dissonant those two notes are from each other. And then moving on to the next note and then the next note, and you really do need to do that for every single note. So the first note is scale degree 2. Now, that note was a very short note. I do wish that that note was a little bit more resonant, and that note is really hard to make resonant, one, considering how low it is and how quick it is. But what I liked about this second phrase is actually the accent of the phrase compared to the first phrase. In the first phrase, the second to last note went rather quickly, and the resolve was on the last note, which she held out a bit longer. The second phrase, she sat a bit longer on that second to last note in comparison to the first phrase before resolving down to the final note in that phrase. And when I talk about accent, I really mean how she chose to shape the phrase. There are certain notes that you can choose to accent that is used in order to give shape to the overall phrase. Another thing I want to point out is how much chest voice she is incorporating in this intro despite there not being words. And you can really hear that chest voice come through quite a bit in this third phrase as she goes into her upper register. So the last note we ended on was Then the next phrase starts on and it continues to go up. Now you can choose to start that note in mixed voice or full on chest or even in head voice and just keep the head voice going the higher you go. But she actually continues that chest voice into the higher range, which gives such a different effect. Those 3 lines alone are perfect examples of how you can shape the phrase by making them all different. In the first phrase, she didn't sit on the second to last note as long as she did on the second phrase, which made it different than the first. And then in the third phrase, the arranger wrote the notes to go up in the higher register, and she chose to continue that chest voice up into that higher register, which gave more volume in that one phrase, which in turn made it different than the first two. All of these choices are important when considering what you're going to do with all of your phrases, with or without words. I don't know what part of America she is from. I say that because some words, there's an accent that comes out, and I understand everyone has an accent, but I can't figure out where hers comes from. But I specifically heard it for the first time on the word hands. Somebody's hands. That word is on one note, and you can hear the change in vowel on the latter half of the note as she was closing off to the ND before going into the next words.
Somebody's hands who felt like mine. Somebody's hands who felt like mine.
I think one of my favorite lines so far with words is cigarette was burning slow. I loved one, how she sat on that longer held note on the word cigarette. And then I love how effortlessly she went down into the word slow. That entire line just seemed like she had so much control of her air.
Highway curve, the sun sank low. Buckley on the radio. A cigarette was burning slow.
That all has to do with your inhalation and then your management of air. And that is also determined by what dynamics you choose to give in that line. Are you going to do vibrato? Where exactly are you going to do it? For how long are you going to do that for? Where are you going to give straight tone notes? Are you going to add chest voice here and then move to head voice? Are you going to decrescendo? Are you going to crescendo and then go to a very strong piano? All of these different dynamics you do require an immense amount of breath management because each dynamic requires a different amount of air. And when you choose to do your line and you finalize whatever dynamics you're going to do, you'll start to get a better understanding of, oh, okay, I can't do, let's say, this particular line in all head voice because I don't have the skill, let's say, to be able to manage that much air that is needed for a head voice for this very long phrase. So instead, let's say I'm going to take out vibrato, that already requires so much air, and I'm just going to do straight tone. Oh, okay, I can manage it that way. Now that you got that down, maybe I can add some chest voice all throughout here because that might be a little less demanding air-wise than head voice all throughout. You got to play around with all of those choices, which can be very difficult, to see how then you can manage that air. That, I think, was beautifully displayed in this one particular line. And the way she resolved the line did not sound like she ran out of air, which to me solidified her idea and her management of her air. Let's talk about this next section where more instrumentalists come in. The majority of them are doing the same rhythm, but the strings, at least a section of the strings, I believe, are still holding that pedaled tonic note. This part is, how do I put this? Is deceivingly difficult. For that many people to be able to pluck or strike the same note at the same time, that many times is so hard. And you can even hear, if you listen so closely and so annoyingly like me, you can actually hear that not everyone is always on time. It's so hard, you all. And then on top of that, you incorporate that many people.
Because I was free. Once upon another time, before I knew which life was mine, before I left the child behind me.
That is so hard. One thing I do give props to all of them on is it seems as if the dynamic choices that they pre-selected before the performance, they all seem to carry through with those choices. Okay, I just re-listened to the beginning, and honestly, I'm not even sure who or what is playing that pedal tonic note. I don't see any stringed instruments moving at all during that held note, and the camera person is not going anywhere near whoever is playing that note. So I'm sorry, I don't know where that's coming from. That prolonged note from the beginning seems like it was distributed to a different instrument. The pedal note is much louder and more present in the second half where the strings are plucking all together. God, who is playing that note? That's gonna bother me. I don't know. It seems way too quiet to be a woodwind. It's definitely not a brass. This will just be one big question mark.
Before I knew which life was mine, before I left the child behind me,
So pretty.
I saw myself in summer nights, and stars lit up like candlelight. I'd make my wish, but mostly I believed in yellow lines and tire marks and sun-kissed skin and handlebars, and where I stood was where I was to be. And once upon another time, decided nothing could be done.
Interesting.
I would just I'd keep on driving because I was free.
That was nice. Oh, that was so beautiful. That was so beautiful. I really loved Ben Folds' line. And sometimes that voice can be hard to pick out, especially if they're three of the same voices, three women. But it's a bit easier to pick out because he's the only male voice within this trio. His lines were so pretty. There was a particularly exciting moment, for me at least, when the camera really zoomed in on all three singers on the words deciding nothing. This is just after Once Upon Another Time. I was excited because it was nice to see the mouth shape of the three different singers considering their background. I did find out that Ben Folds is a classically trained instrumentalist. Miss Bareilles, as many of us know, has a strong background in musical theater and pop. And then Miss Shaw is known for a modern classical sound. So you're getting essentially possibly 2 to 3 different-ish techniques. I don't know how trained Ben Folds is in voice. But to see the difference in their mouth, and specifically the amount of teeth that is showing and how open their mouth is on the word specifically nothing, was quite interesting. We're specifically going to look at the first syllable in the word nothing. Miss Shaw has more of an oval shape on this one particular syllable, na, in the word nothing. Now, Miss Bareilles decided to keep the mouth integrity that she had on the word just before, which is deciding. That word ends in a closed vowel, ing, and you can see that vowel and the shape that is necessary to produce that vowel continue up into the syllable na for the word nothing. You can see her upper teeth are showing, almost all of them are showing, and she actually is more on a smile because of that. Instead of a rounded position, she is more like this, where the bottom of her mouth is somewhat rounded, not enough to make a full bottom half O vowel, but enough to where she is smiling. And then Mr. Folds seems like he has his bottom lip kind of tucked in and just a very relaxed, easygoing nothing. I point all of these out because they're all attempting to produce the same vowel, na, which is a schwab. But look at the drastic mouth positions that are on each individual singer. That can very well be because of their background training, and that could also be because of what is aesthetically pleasing to them in terms of that vowel. And that will be different considering how you were trained and also how much chest voice you're choosing to incorporate or leave out in that note. If you liked all that you saw, make sure you hit that subscribe button down below and comment down below what piece by this concert series, Declassified, you would like me to do a performance analysis on next. Lastly, make sure you check out the description box for ways you can keep in touch with me, get access to exclusive perks, and check out the Soprano Notes blog. I hope you have a good day, and I'll see you soon. Bye!